have here business leaders from various kinds of businesses, ranging from kitchen appliances in the case of Chandru, to watches, accessories, and a history of jewelry in the case of Johnson. Karan's been in the apparel business for the longest period of time. He heads Easybuy. Then we have Vinay, who heads Costa Coffee, which is, and Vinay himself has been in the beverages business, Coke and Costa Coffee. And then we have Vivek, who heads Pin Code. And Pin Code is the new face of traditional retail, which is going online. So I'll get Vivek to kind of dwell on it, because that might be of great interest to all of you all who are here. But I think the most important thing that we are trying to kind of get our hands around is that how are retail business models changing? First, how are we adapting to that change? Second, and who is leading the change? So I think if we can try and get a sense from Johnson first as to, because I've been in the watches business for the longest, so I know all the pains of what happens when you have to sell watches. So if you were to look at your category, could you kind of elaborate on what is leading change in your category? Is it customers? Is it coming from outside of your category? Or is it the fact that people have no longer found time to be of relevance?
Thanks, Bijou. Am I audible? Yeah. Well, as Bijou said, I've spent a lot of time in the time business, so perhaps I'm kind of slightly qualified to answer this. I don't think any industry has been sounded the death knell so many times as the watch industry, as it were. Every couple of decades or so, the watch industry is announced as dying, dead, or nearly there. We're still around, by the way, and I think thriving at this point of time. But everything actually has changed. Every aspect of the business has changed. Let's take a few of those aspects to understand that quickly. Product, if you look at from a product point of view, we've gone through multiple upheavals over the last 40, 50 years. There was the entire period of Swiss domination, followed by the fact that quartz came into business when the Japanese came, with their quartz technology, a complete change of business from a functional device to a fashion device. Then you moved on to the era, not too long back, of the smartwatches, which completely transformed the business. Prior to that, there were smartphones when people said, you don't need a watch any longer. And I think we are seeing a movement beyond now smartwatches. People still want to wear a fashion device on their wrists, and we are seeing a resurgence of the business, and the Swiss having come back very strongly into the game. So that's the product end of the business. From the retail end of the business, there are whole channels, and Bijou, I think, spoke about that earlier. There are whole channels of business that didn't even exist when I started off in the watch business. B2B, B2C, all of those terms that he spoke about were actually bad alphabets at that point of time. What you have today are completely new channels of business, and all of us are adapting to that. There is amazing new technology that has come to serve and help us in these businesses. When you start looking at AI and we start looking at imaging, for example, the fact that you don't really need to go to a store to wear a watch, you can have that on the screen. You can actually have a visual imprint of the watch on your screen and figure out how the watch looks on you. So really speaking, every aspect of the business has changed. I think the only thing that is consistent has been changed. So we can touch upon other points as we go about, but last but really not the least is the consumer. What the consumer looks, wants, feels, and needs from this category, that's also changed and is evolving and changing as we speak. More about that as we speak.
Sure. Thanks, Johnson. But I think one of the things that you mentioned at the end was about the fact that the consumer has changed. So the product continues to be relevant, though the consumer is changing. I think that's the important point you'd leave with us. Vinay, a question to you. Coffee used to be typically drunk in the south. Tea used to be drunk in the north. Now things have changed. You get everybody drinking everything across India. Coffee used to be in the confines of the house, but then it actually moved out into cafes. What spurred people to actually move out of homes to drink coffee in a cafe?
So I think very interesting, and I was just going back to a point that Johnson made, See, I think a lot of this has to do with categories. When we look at coffee in India, or espresso-based coffee as we would call it, it's still a very nascent category, right? So, right, India primarily a tea drinking market, coffee in the south, but that's filter coffee that we grew up at home. And now it is getting all these other codes in the category around handcrafted nature of coffee, coffee being a community thing, it's something more social than just something which is individual. So when I look at some of the factors which are possibly spurring this interest in premium espresso coffee, I think one, as a category, it is seen as clean energy. It is seen as very social, a great way to meet up with friends, take a break, spur me on kind of activity. And third, I think the sheer amount of exposure that our consumers in India, thanks to new age social media, are getting around this category and its development everywhere else in the world. So it's a category which is beyond transactional and has a lot more codes around it. And just going back to what you were saying about retail, right? I think something that we could dwell on is the role that retail would play, or classical retail would play in emerging categories. And I think it's very different for established categories versus emerging categories. For categories like the ones we operate in, I think retail is definitely the cornerstone of experience, introduction, recruitment into the category. So I think that's something we could really discuss a bit on. And therefore this blend of how retail kind of fits into this category.
I'm often amazed at what happens in China. You have, I think, between two brands itself, Luckin and Starbucks, close to about 18,000 odd outlets, just amongst the two of them. And then of course there are a whole bunch of other brands which have also got thousands of outlets. And no chain in India today has even got 1,000 outlets. Okay, China is a tea drinking country, yet took to coffee. What will it take for Indians to get to the Chinese level of coffee?
I think it's really going to be how the category develops and how the players participating in the category kind of help bring the experience to consumers. You're so right. I think between Luckin and Coffee, which has been really started by ex-Luckin folks, we have close to 25,000 outlets, and then there's Starbucks on top of it. I think in markets in China and now also Southeast Asia, right? When you look at a Malaysia, you look at an Indonesia, even a Thailand, the spectrum of offerings from value offerings to recruitment to offers to experiential, I think is what really drives the category. So to answer your question, I think in India, from a coffee category perspective, as we see a whole host of participants who come in and say, listen, this is what I stand for in coffee. This is my view on coffee, and this is what I think you should be experiencing, we'll bring it. So it's not just the number of players. I think it's going to be a function of what each player brings to the table. We believe at Costa Coffee, really, it's about handcrafted nature of our coffee, the community, and the fact that we are fuel for creative expressions in our store. So I think as we see this, the second thing possibly is it comes down to consumption occasions. Right? Maybe we go back 10, 15 years ago, and a lot of it happened in Bangalore with Cafe Coffee Day, where all of us really got introduced to coffee in the first place. It was purely social, I think. Now I think the proliferation of coffee is, listen, I want to have it when I go into work. I want to really take a break. I want it to be community on the weekends, but I also want it to be something that I do on the weekdays. So I think as these consumer occasions build up, and you see various players coming in with their view of what the category is, just like a lot of other categories, I think that's what will create the proliferation of coffee in the business.
Sure. Vivek, a question to you. It might help if you explain PIN code and your integration with ONDC, because that might be useful for the audience at large to know. But I think the more important thing which I wanted to understand from you is, after that, how do you make sure that the filter coffee people who sell coffee at 10 and 20 rupees are able to deliver to consumers in their homes?
Okay, so this last question is out of syllabus, but I'll try and cover that. Okay, quick background on the journey of PIN code. We are a PhonePe product. On PhonePe, over time, if you look at, there was a slide that Bijou showcased that 40% of digital payment, now digital payments is 40%. At least 50% portion of that is on PhonePe. There are about 70 odd crore smartphone users. Of that, more than 55 crore have registered PhonePe. And 26 crore are using PhonePe actively and open PhonePe more than 300 times a month. So that kind of tells you in terms of how customer is evolving. At the same time, we laid out digital payments network on the merchant side, where we onboarded or digitized sellers for digital payments more than about 4 crore. When we started the journey, we didn't even know we had 4 crores retailers in the country. Now those many are digitized by us. So, we laid out the network. The idea was to can we kind of take the next step and enable commerce between the two. That is how PIN code manifested from that. And there the idea was that we open PIN code app, we connect consumers to retailers and enable commerce between the two. That is how we started. At the start of the journey, we only opened the consumer side. We expected ONDC participants to kind of help us solve the issue with respect to digitization from seller side. Over time, we realized that there will be a lot of resources, a lot of investment that will go into that as well. So now, about 6 months back, we opened the seller digitization part also. So at this stage, we have more than 5,000 retailers who are selling to PIN code consumers, which means we are promoting that to hyperlocal customers because we understand customers' locality, we understand customers' persona. Now, if you see, if you make a payment using PhonePe or on merchant side, we understand which locality you live in. What are you trying to buy? What kind of persona you have? Are you a premium customer or are you a value for money customer? So that kind of information we can make from the payments data that we have because of the different payment use cases we have opened. Starting from, are you a prepaid customer, postpaid customer? You are a four-wheeler because we opened insurance. So there are various things that we have. Now, so that is what we do. We are a hyperlocal platform, both on seller side as well as the retailer side. We connect the two. And in fact, it takes a lot of effort to kind of digitize a traditional retailer because the way they have come into function, the way their DNA is in terms of understanding consumer is evolving because of the online nature of the customer and their very different expectation from online buying. Now coming to the last one in terms of how we enable coffee to be sold via our network, because we understand which customer buys coffee or goes to a coffee shop. That kind of information further helps us kind of target those customers because the probability of customers who go to a coffee shop and making coffee at home will be pretty high, right? Using that context, we'll be able to kind of promote Costa Coffee sachets to a coffee drinker. So that obviously is something that we'll enable via PIN code.
Thanks, Vivek. Vinay, you wanted to add something?
No, I'm just saying we need to have an offline chat.
Karan, we talked about the polarization of markets into value and premium. And one of the categories where it's happened in front of our eyes is apparel. And one of the brands which has also been at the forefront of driving it is Easybuy. So when you think of Easybuy, could you reflect on why did you think a low price garment model? And when you say price is the only thing, but there are other things you have to optimize around: availability, quality, design, and lots of other things. So when you think of all of those equations, to be able to deliver it at a price which is low, what are some of the opportunities you see which made you embark into that market? And what are some of the challenges that you've seen in being in that market?
Okay, good morning everyone. I think the challenges part I'll answer a little later. there are many challenges to operate in the value space. But I think the first part is the first question is the exciting part, which is the journey and why. I think Vinay said something very beautiful. The consumer occasions have proliferated over the years. And if I start just from the consumer side, they're becoming far more discerning, they're far more demanding. There is a much larger affinity to storytelling and authenticity at this point. They live online, so the expectation of digital-first comms, digital-first brands is again proliferating. All of this has almost reshaped our industry over the years. I remember back in the day, 10, 15 years back, we used to build our plans around occasions, which was largely weddings and some celebratory occasion. But if you look at the largest cohort, which is the young cohort, and it's growing ever so steadily in India, that cohort is all about living in the moment, is about creating occasions and memories out of thin air. And that's led to a large occasion, which is everyday casual, which is a dressed down occasion. And in that context, anyway, the value space has always been the largest. If you recall, most marketers would segment the market as a pyramid. I would say it's reshaped a little bit to an hourglass, where consumers are trading up and trading down constantly. That's led to a very, very large segment, which is the true value space, as we call it at Easybuy. Here, I think what the consumers are most concerned about is the core proposition, which is value for money, which is, can you give me something aspirational? Can I look good for all these everyday casual occasions? Can I have looks for 40, 50, 60 occasions? Can I get the kind of validation that I'm seeking from my immediate friends and family, etc., without hurting my pocket? And in that context, I think a large portion of the unorganized market started getting organized through these true value players, and Easybuy is one of them. We try to first offer a very, very sharp core proposition. And Bijou, you mentioned what are the dimensions. I think one obviously is price. You have to be lowest. We are a format which is under 1,000 rupees for everything we offer. Obviously, that has to come with a table stakes on other vectors like quality. I mean, consumers don't want to necessarily pay low and then get thrifted. So they are very, very clear about what that table stakes quality is. You have to deliver that 24/7 throughout the year. And of course, then there is the experience part. We can probably talk about that later, but I think eventually what they're looking for is a very homogeneous experience across touch points, which really creates that very, very core cohort of consumers who are then your advocates, and then they come back. So we also, as a format, and it's not just us, anyone in the value space will tell you, it's not about selling her that one extra garment, it's about getting her back into our stores or any other channel. So I think as this evolves, I see this, Bijou, to be a very, very large segment. It's already, that story is already bearing out in many formats. To your second part on challenges, of course, with such kind of a format which is so low on price, it brings multiple challenges, from the experience that you are able to afford to the supply chain to inventory and many other aspects of our business. But that also leads us to get sharper and better.
So could you just dwell on two challenges? One challenge is keeping up with the customer. The second is competition from online.
So on the first part, that's the more challenging part, because the consumer is evolving so rapidly. There's so much information, awareness, also misinformation. There is so much expectation now from every format, irrespective of value, premium, sub-premium, bridge to luxury. Everyone wants to look good throughout. Everyone wants to ape a brand or a label. Everyone wants to look West. So it is definitely the biggest challenge in the value space to keep up to this demand. But I think that's the real proposition, and that's the real victory. If you're able to keep up to this, I think as a format, it becomes a lot more sustainable. Sorry, what was your second challenge?
About the competition from online.
The competition from online, I think, is, I wouldn't say is necessarily a competition because we don't have anything in this segment, Bijou. But yes, there is a large market, which is the unorganized market, which continues to be, I mean, we call it our size of the prize. But from the online space, I don't think there's any credible large offering that some of these retail formats have offered over the last few years. But yes, I mean, never say never. I think there's a lot of, I mean, a couple of players have actually cracked it wide open, and hence there are people eyeing this market as we speak. But the unit economics for online just doesn't work. I heard your question on filter coffee for PIN code. I'd love to have an offline chat with him on apparel as well. At this point, I don't see anyone who's cracked it at this price point, but we are constantly working towards making it happen, because that also gives us a consumer who's living with us online as well as in our stores, and that's a much more sticky consumer, and that's a far more sustainable model. But at this point, it's not in our radar.
Sure. So Vivek, some referral fees are expected, okay? Chandru's been for 31 years with TTK Prestige. From the time Prestige came up with pressure cookers, to kitchen appliances, to kitchens, from distribution to retail. And if you look at it, he's covered the entire gamut. So when you really look at the Indian woman, who obviously is the majority user of your kitchen, how have you seen the Indian woman evolve, and how have you followed her in what you all do?
No, I'm glad you said she's the major user.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that we've pushed in the last few years is that cooking has no gender. I mean, that's something I feel very strongly about. And yes, I mean, she's changed because she is taking on much more responsibility today in the home, as we all know. And the other thing is, good thing that happened with COVID is it's got a lot of people into the kitchen during the lockdown time. So it no longer became unfashionable, it was a necessity to get into the kitchen. And one of the things that we've been driving even before COVID is, how do we get the man into the kitchen? So the Jo Biwi Se Kare Pyar, for example, was expressing your love by going into the kitchen and helping your wife, which actually has driven our product development to make sure that we are in sync with helping the rest of the family help out. And that's something the woman actually wants, and she likes that empathy for her. And she also wants, what we are seeing is she's being driven by 3 or 4 large themes today for herself in the kitchen. One is health, and this we do through a tremendous amount of interactions with various customers across the country through in-depth interviews. Health has become a major concern, and therefore you are seeing today anyway outside of the kitchen itself, you see a lot of organic products being sold at tremendous amount of premiums, etc., etc. So health. The second is time saving, because the woman is today much more busy. So anything that helps her stay less in the kitchen while not, you know, shirking off her responsibility from the kitchen is something that she is looking for. The third thing is convenience, because domestic help over a period of time has become difficult to maintain. And that's a change that is increasingly happening. Previously, people liked live-in maids. Today, definitely women don't want live-in maids at home. Last one is, of course, aesthetic. I mean, in everything that she buys today for the kitchen, given that kitchens are increasingly becoming open kitchens, is that they must look very good. And today, the other major change that I'm seeing with the woman is, at least in our category, is that she is not averse to looking at something new. So for us, Competition, for example, which used to be earlier, we used to call them unorganized regional players. Today, we call them small organized players who are able to form niches, and we as a leader have to constantly monitor what are those small niches coming up so that we don't, go out of sync with what the woman is looking for. Because she is now going beyond the label. She's saying, what is the value proposition that you are offering me? Not from a price point of view, from what are you offering me for me? And that connect has become very critical today for a brand or for a retailer like us. So when she goes into our retail store, for example, am I able to show her things that she would probably look for on every visit? And how do I make her walk back just because she has an expectation that she might see something new? So that is what is keeping us busy, because this customer of ours is evolving so fast and becoming more and more informed, but yet rewards empathy. And I think that is the critical part.
So can you just emphasize rewards empathy?
So I will give you some wild examples. We had a pressure cooker, which the Prestige cooker was the outer lid pressure cooker. The Hawkins type cooker was the inner fitting lid pressure cooker. And the user interface has defined which cooker went into which home from a mother hand-me-down kind of thing. And both these cookers differ from each other on the way you close and open the cooker. That's all. Everything else is the same. So we said, why not we make a cooker which makes that agnostic to the way you can cook, close and open the cooker. It's a very simple point. And all we did was we said that you don't need to align the lid in a particular way to close and open the cooker. And suddenly the lady said, man, that's something else. Another example was, I don't know how many of you have faced this. She's going out to the market, she says, tells her husband, count 3 whistles and switch off the stove on the pressure cooker. When we brought out an induction cooktop, because mostly the husband never remembered to count the whistles, that's what happened. We brought out an induction cooktop that would count the whistles and shut it off so that she could go. Now, that's a value proposition that she says, yeah, this happens to me every day. Now I don't have to stand in the kitchen all the time. Things like this, she wants to reward. She says, you are trying to understand how my morning is looking like. That's the way she's looking at it.
Wow, great, lovely examples, great. What we'll do is we'll take a short audience session at this point of time. So those who want to ask questions from the audience, you can raise your hands, state your name, and state the question too after that. And then we'll come back again to the panel after a short break.
That was like, okay, you really got us women and the whistles right. Yeah. I also work actively with a lot of brands in the D2C space, and when I was hearing you talk, I was wondering, why is there no formidable D2C brand in this space? So would you give insights, and how are you trying to probably make your brand D2C?
No, there are new brands coming up as D2C brands actually, and I must admit they've done some things better than what we did. D2C has become increasingly important to us because in our category, first of all, I mean, like what Karan said, the old traditional buying occasions have now changed. People want to buy anytime. We are now on quick commerce, for example. I never expected that 1 year back we would sell pressure cookers on quick commerce. But we are selling quite considerably on quick commerce. So D2C has become very critical. D2C is a skill set that is quite difficult for a company like ours, which is used to communicating in a particular way, to master. And we are getting there. And for us, it is the future. Because I think the customer, whether she's a woman or he's a man, is looking at saying, I want it now. And can I have a direct connect with the customer? The traditional model of a brand like us, which used to engage pre-sale and during sale, and after sales was generally in a problem situation, today needs to engage with the brand post-sale not in an after-sales service situation. And again, D2C becomes very critical, not just from a selling proposition, but from an engagement proposition. Now, how I connect with that customer, either directly through my own connect or through my omni-channel, through my retailers, is going to become critical. So for example, we have now got our 600 stores on the omni-channel. And what we've now said is, anything that the store goes home and delivers, can you now immediately establish a connection with that customer? Because now you have gone home to say, okay, if there's something that you need to be exchanged, we are here. You don't have to go to the website. I'm just giving you one example. Is there something that you need as a service or just a maintenance? Can I come and give it to you? Because direct to sales that we are seeing with the smaller brands is largely selling. I am seeing direct to sales as engagement. And that, I think, is the future for a brand like us.
Any other questions that you want to take at this stage? We got somebody, Sharmila.
Thanks, Bijou. This question is to Vivek, and it'll probably help you too, Chandru, specifically about brands and how do they know their consumers. Looks like you're in the right sweet spot to actually connect the brand with the consumer. In terms of, you said that you have the seller who are also coming on your platform, as well as the consumers who are buying from PIN code. So what are your thoughts around data and that rich data on consumers that you have, and the richer data on the channels through which you're selling and monetizing that?
Okay, so couple of things. First, an observation that I've seen, because we are working with about 5,000 retailers. One is that data richness today, as we speak, is very, very weak in offline retail, because the engagement that a customer does with the seller is very limited. The DNA itself doesn't exist. Customer walks into the store, if they find something, they buy it. Otherwise, there is no interaction that tells the retailer or a brand that they were looking for something which they didn't have. In online, when I say online, which means in the context of PIN code, when we digitize a store, there are a couple of things that happen. One, we have a global search, which means customer, when they don't find any product or any particular brand by browse, they search. They search across stores. Or if they get into a retailer's page, which means they open a particular retail format that I want to buy certain products from this particular store, they again search if they don't find anything in browse. So there are a number of things that we get to understand in terms of what a customer is looking for globally in that particular locality, in a particular geography, or in a particular store, or in a particular category. So all that information is something even without, because see, when there is engagement, there is inertia in terms of merchant asking, customer telling, that itself is an inertia that kind of limits the kind of data that you can collect. But in the context of online, without even really engaging or somebody asking them a question, them answering a question, they leave trails of what they're looking for. Again, geography, category, all those cuts are available. And because of that, we are helping retailers in multiple fold. One is we tell them what they should plan in terms of inventory, what customer is looking for. And if there are cancellations because a customer is looking for something, what they will need to manage in terms of inventory levels as well. So those are the things we are able to share because again, because of the nature of commerce that happens on our platform. And that helps them not just on PIN code platform, that helps them at their store as well. Because there the same customer is looking for similar stuff. It's just that they are not engaging with the retailer to tell them the feedback, give them the feedback. They just happen to go to the next shop to find the same stuff.
Any other questions? What we call as loyalty programs. Okay, and we used to believe that if a customer came in, we'd give them a physical card. Now it's become a telephone number, so it's much more simpler to track. We are able to capture what they bought How do you see the nature of customer loyalty changing? And Karan, this question is first to you and after that to Vinay. Because in both your categories, frequency is important and options are many. So how do you ensure that when the options are many, that they keep coming back to you and not going to your competition? So if you could start, Karan.
So, I mean, like I said earlier, that we are not online, and hence we use tools which will help us crawl the internet, crawl options that consumers are looking at. Our biggest promise to our consumers is to curate an offering which is almost tailor-made for all the occasions that she's seeking. Now, when it comes to a loyalty program, well, I think while it is extremely critical, I think for us it's important to first live up to the core proposition, which is living up to the price-value equation, living up to newness almost every week or every fortnight. All of that leads to complications which doesn't allow you to necessarily personalize. So before personalizing, we have to first deliver on all of these core propositions that we've called out as promises. But having said that, I think the biggest, and you said, how do you bring her back? I think because she's looking for something new, all we need to do is curate the right proposition, curate the right offering. And for that, we are constantly using tools which advise us, guide us to remain on point, remain ahead of the curve. On transactional loyalty, I think if you're not doing a meaningful job, it's best not to do it. Because I think consumers look through that nowadays. Consumers want more authenticity than gimmickry. You know, so we also have loyalty programs, but if you ask me, we don't do a good job. We are not meaningful enough in her life for her to worry about points or, you know, some coupons or some windfall gains, because she has, her phone is filled with options from multiple retailers, multiple categories, and instead of confusing her even more, I think it's better to first live up to that proposition, which will necessarily bring her back. But when it comes to a very curated loyalty program, again, there our plans are around clienteling and giving her what she wants more than, you know, freebies and any call to actions.
Look at it in the context of a high frequency business, which is coffee.
No, so I think I'll build on what Karan kind of said. One, you're right, I think it builds, it depends on the frequency of a category and how it builds out. I think the couple of themes that we are seeing, one, value always matters, right? But you need something which is on top of it. And for a high frequency, high involvement category like ourselves, I think it comes down to experiences and cohorts, right? So beyond the points, will you give me an exclusive access to a workshop which talks to you about the various types of coffees, right? Which talks to you about origins of coffee. Today we have 3 of our baristas from India, Costa, serving at the Paris Olympics for the next 1 month, right? Can we give an experience where this team comes back and talks to them about the experience of making coffee, right? Excellence here. So I think that's one space which is where you build a top transactional pieces of it. And I think in a high frequency category, the part B is as important as part A. I think that's been our learning. The second part is, I think coming. Thanks. You know, the consumer occasions we spoke about, I see a lot of value in loyalty and cross category. So if you are a high frequency coffee drinker, what are the other categories, brands that excite you? So coffee and reading go together. So listen, can you do something for me in your loyalty program, which also excites me to go to, I'm making this up, Blossoms in Bangalore. right? So is there a way to build experiences and then cross-category with relevant pieces? Nothing new, a lot of other brands have done it, but I think for high frequency, you need to be able to bring that in, and that's what we are trying to do. And the third piece is, beyond loyalty, is the whole personalization in CRM that we are all working. We still have a journey to do on that, but we certainly see richness, value, and superior consumer experience coming out of that. I think that's the broad learning that we have here.
Yeah, I wanted to add that, add something to that topic from a category that I guess people don't buy as often as coffee. And I was just trying to figure out, do they buy watches more often or pressure cookers more often? I will figure that one. I'll check that out with Chandru later. But, I want to differentiate a little bit between consumer engagement that you talked about in terms of engaging with the brand and loyalty on the other side. Your loyalty, I'm assuming, translates itself into another purchase. But I'm saying when you look at fashion, and I'm speaking from the background of fossil and fashion, which is that you still need to engage with the consumer as often as you can. You need to be relevant for the consumer as a fashion statement, as a fashion brand, whether the consumer buys today or doesn't buy today or buys 6 months later. So I think the aspect in terms of consumer engagement, making sure that the consumer continues to buy into your brand is a constant activity. Unfortunately for us, I wish people bought watches as often as they buy coffee, but nevertheless, I think, you need to be right there in the mind of consumers. One of the things that has worked for us, which is fairly simplistic, is the number of people who are willing to be engaged, which means that all we did was provide a QR code at the checkout counter and ask the customer if the customer was willing to be engaged with the brand. And as long as you made that experience as simple as possible, consumers were willing to buy into it. Our response rate in terms of engaging on the QR code has been pretty high, assuming that they've bought in the first place. So it's just another dimension to the topic that you took up.
Since you're on the subject, one of the things I wanted to check with you was about omni-channel. And when we think about figuring out how to keep track of the customer, one part is expecting the customer to come into your store. The other is reaching out to the customer wherever he or she is. And in some cases, you've got to be able to present options to the customer where you can buy here, or you can buy online, or you can do a lot of things between the two channels. So how do you think of a category like watches and, say, jewelry in this context of omni-channel?
It's an interesting perspective out there. Let me see if I can figure out where we come from on this. So let's remember one thing, irrespective of whatever channels we are talking about, the consumer is the same. At least in categories such as ours, we have a young audience that's extremely digitally savvy, and pretty much, the core audience being 25 to 35, the entire experience is seamless for them. So the consumer is the same. The channels that you talk about are channels of convenience, depending on the time, place, occasion, etc. So what we are trying to do, and what we attempt to do, is to make sure that the consumer gets the same experience and the same treatment across as far as the channel provides, irrespective of the channel. What do I mean by that? Our consumers, let's take the entire journey of a consumer, starting with the discovery process. There is no law which says that the discovery process happens for our category only online. It could happen online or offline. So when you look at the entire gamut of activities that results in a sale, omnichannel, to our understanding, is where the consumer can discover anywhere, can select anywhere, buy anywhere, pay anywhere, get delivered that product anywhere, can return that product anywhere. So that's a complete chain of activities, and it really doesn't matter to the consumer. It's what is convenient at that point of time. Let me give you an example. Watches are a high gift category. So you want to gift something to a relative of yours who's sitting in another town. Well, the watch is bought in Bangalore, the watch is gifted in Chennai, but if the consumer wants to return that watch, there's no point of saying bring it back to Bangalore. It needs to be returned in Chennai itself. So I think we need to provide that entire gamut of services. It makes our lives a lot more complicated. I can tell you, from a consumer's point of view, the world has become a far more simpler place. From the company's point of view, the world has become a far more complex place. Yeah, and you're trying to match, all these little elements that actually make that experience seamless. It is it's a never-ending job. It's never perfect. I don't think we've reached a point where we would like to say we are truly omni in every sense of the word, but that's the attempt because that's where our consumers are. No more, no less. The consumers are agnostic, and I'm not speaking for all categories. I assume there are some categories that are higher, require a certain process in terms of purchase and engagement. But at least in our categories, the consumer reaches across all these channels and is completely agnostic to which channel. It depends on what they find convenient at that point of time.
So Chandru, just one question to you. We've all talked about technology, the pervasive role that technology plays in our businesses, etc. You've got a great category, which is kitchens, where technology can be both a part of your business, can also be part of your products. So what are the kind of things that you're doing to keep abreast of the tech-savvy customer whom we are all serving, who are looking for technology, but find kitchens very boring sometimes?
Yeah, first I'll talk about the products, for example. So we are seeing electric cooking as a theme that is evolving as we go forward. People are looking at moving, and electricity in India is getting to be available consistently. So that is one thing. And that offers us opportunity to use kitchen automation as a theme and develop products around that. Again, around the earlier themes which I spoke of, which is convenience, time saving kind of thing, which those two pillars can really float very well on electric cooking and Internet of Things connected devices. So for example, our first 4 products that we brought out one was a kettle. I mean, it worked on a simple insight. You boil water in a kettle and then cool it down to the temperature you want and then drink that. It happens with everyone. So you're actually wasting energy. So we said, why not have a kettle which can actually help you heat water only to the extent that you want and keep it at that temperature continuously, and you control it from your mobile phone. It's just a simple insight. Can I do automated cooking by setting it on my phone? Can I create a kitchen hood that actually alerts me if there's a gas leak in my house on my mobile phone? So we're trying to use this not for gimmicks. We're trying to use this to actually solve for pain points that are real and use technology to integrate internet, mobile phone, kitchen in the house. Because home automation anyway has been a theme on electrics that we are seeing. That is at the product end. At the customer end and at the business end, really that's where our challenge has been. Our challenge has not been on availability of technology or what we can buy as SaaS or implement new products, but actually been with harnessing those tools by our leadership to use it to meaningful business decisions. That is where I have found the challenge, because all of us in TTK Prestige, it's not uncommon for somebody to serve for 31 years. That has been a problem and an asset. So we are all used to getting things done in a particular way. We are all used, and we've succeeded fairly well. So, why should I change? I'm in my comfort zone. That has been a bigger challenge for me, because now I have the CRM, I have the POS, I have integrated it, I have AI, I have all of that. But what are the right methods to actually leverage that towards reaching my customer better? How do I then take that down the organization to say there is a better, quicker, faster way to reach my customer and give that customer a better experience? I think that has been a challenge for a legacy organization like me, which is keeping us busy right now, which is why the entire fresh energy needs to come in and do things in a different way.
Great. So that is a good note to kind of end this panel discussion. We've got a little bit of time, but I've been requested to cut short by a few minutes because we started a bit late. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of this and sharing so freely of your knowledge.